I will kick things off. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining today. My name is Megan Riley and I am head of the JLL Spark team based in not so sunny San Francisco. I am joined by 4 of our portfolio companies today who all have their fair share of experience selling into enterprise. I think there's some good success stories, but also some good war stories they're going to share with us today, which is exciting. Before we get started though, I wanted to give a quick background on JLL Spark for those that don't or who aren't familiar. JLL Spark is the global venture arm of JLL, also part of our larger technology initiative, JLL Technologies. We invest in early stage companies who are leveraging technology to improve the commercial real estate sector, both on the occupier and investor side. As of today, I believe we've invested in 20 companies, and that number will continue to grow. And our big differentiator is that in addition to capital, we also work to get our portfolio companies in front of customers. So we have a dedicated growth team, which I am proud to be on, that works with our portfolio companies and with our key stakeholders internally to drive business, to get our portfolio companies in front of clients, for feedback, or pilots, you name it, where there's a resource. So enough about me. Let's get right into it. To kick things off, I would love to have all of our panelists, starting with Maya, if that's okay, give us a quick, let's do like a minute or two introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your company, and then we'll get into it. Maya, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan, for having us here. So I'm Maya Aaron. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Business Development at CREtech Technologies. I've been in the startup arena for a decade, roughly. Started out with 6 years in the Israeli Defense Force in cybersecurity, and since then have been part of many different startups, so a lot of war stories here today. CREtech Technologies is probably the biggest opportunity I've ever had the honor to take part of, really. We're a motor company and we're gonna reshape the electric motor world. We're coming out with the most efficient, most reliable, software-driven motor. So we're very honored to be a JLL portfolio company and happy to talk about things today.
Eric, you wanna introduce yourself? Eric is all coming from us all the way from Norway.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so my name is Erik Bergvåg. I'm the founder and president of Disruptive Technologies. My background is from semiconductors, so I've been with a few startups as well in that space. We built the first digital radio chips in CMOS technology, and that was in the early 2000s, and that market really exploded with wireless entry for cars, alarm systems, Bluetooth, and so on. And so we sold that company to Texas Instruments in the US and built a new company, the world's lowest power microcontroller. And what during that time was that many of our chipsets went into sensors, but they were cumbersome to use. So we decided to build a company with making a sensor that was extremely scalable, very simple to use, and it ended up with this sensor. It's a stamp size sensor, and it has 15 years of battery lifetime, delivering the data on an API to other cloud solutions. So that is also very happy to be here at this event, and also very happy to be with the JLL. Thanks, Megan.
Gary, you want to go next? And can everyone mute when you're not talking? I think we're back.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Gary Cao, VP of Business Development Operations at DealPath. Great to be here with Megan and the rest of the panel. A little bit about DealPath. Our mission is to create the world's leading investment management platform for data-driven decisions. We're founded in 2014 with offices in San Francisco and New York. To date, about over $5 trillion have been evaluated on our platform by a few hundred firms such as Blackstone, Oxford, Manulife, AEW. Product-wise, we cover the deal transaction and management component of the real estate lifecycle. So really allowing our customers to source and manage their deal pipelines during acquisitions, streamlining their investment committee review process, manage their due diligence with task and file sharing, and then hand off into asset management solutions like Yardi, MI, and RealPage with API integrations. Excited to be here and look forward to talking more soon.
Awesome. Steve?
Hey everyone, I'm Steve. I'm the VP of Sales for Jones. Jones has combined software with artificial intelligence to build the simplest solution ever made to manage insurance liability for property owners, developers, contractors. Most relevant part about my background is I spent majority of my career in early stage SaaS companies and pretty much in Proptech. I kind of fell into it with a company called Hightower. That was a leasing asset management platform. We merged with VTS. I ran sales for the East Coast there for 2 years, and then went to Honest Buildings for a couple of years before we were acquired by Procore over the summer, and then joined Jones last August.
Sweet. Thank you. Great. Let's get right into it. With Maya, I know we have a founder's perspective, but we also have VP of Sales and Business Development on, so I think it'll be an interesting, we'll get some interesting insights for both sides. But Maya, this is a simple, I think, but loaded question. What makes startup enterprise ready?
It is a simple and loaded question. I think, I mean, there's the obvious portion of that. You know, obviously you have to have a really good, value proposition and business case, to approach an enterprise with what you're doing. But I think at the bottom line really is that there are two non-obvious things that you need to be prepared for. I guess from my standpoint, from what I've encountered, is one is a mindset for being a lot more flexible. I mean, you're the founder or you're the VP sales, you're pushing in something that's, you believe in and is disruptive. But going into enterprise means that you need to be extremely flexible in tailoring what you're doing to, to that enterprise. And that's a mindset that you need to be ready. And I guess the second thing is that it's not that obvious. You need to not only come with a good business case, but also with a comfort level that, is around building trust. Enterprises don't make decisions like that every day. If they don't trust your ability to, match the behavior and match the culture around, what suits that enterprise, even the best business case won't be enough to win over like an enterprise. So, I mean, I guess those are the two things that are not as obvious.
Who was your first time?
Sorry?
Who was Turntide's first enterprise?
So our first large enterprise was a very large retailer with thousands of sites across the US. So Turntide, our motor is currently, the application is around HVAC, Proptech. So the application is going into commercial HVAC. So we're looking for large commercial HVAC, multi-site, properties that, that have a large spend around, HVAC around the year. So we reduce that by more than half, and looking for these is not a problem, since there's, really after LED, if you haven't done, this is the next low hanging fruit from a property perspective in terms of reducing OpEx. Large retailer, very sensitive, touching equipment, and being, at the point where my barometer is always, if this person can get fired for this decision, building trust is the most important thing that you can do, right? That's the level of comfort that you need to build in addition to that business case. So when a large retailer that puts customer satisfaction first, puts that at risk by playing around with the HVAC, that's something that you need to really take care of.
If a decision, or if someone can get fired for taking a risk on you, would you typically say they're a decision maker? Would that be a good way of kind of evaluating whether or not you're talking to the right person?
In a way, because it means that they're representing you in the company. They're taking on the risk to, to be your evangelist, right? They're speaking your language internally and selling it internally. In enterprise, I've always, discovered that you're the salesperson, I'm the VP sales, but I'm never the internal salesperson, right? I will never be the person that is actually selling this to the decision makers. So that person that, takes a leap and represents me, that person would influence the decisions, and I need that function for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. Steve, did you do anything on that? I see you nodding your head.
I disagree with the trust. I mean, that is probably one of the hardest things as a early stage company. You're not going to have all of the customer references and financial strength and some of the things that they might look for in their other partners. And building trust is a difficult thing, and it's essential because it's gonna require that company to, make a very educated and thoughtful decision, but it's going to take like faith and trust that you're going to deliver on what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, I'm going to jump to Eric, and then we'll get back to that, what we were just talking about. But Eric, as the founder of the company, how were you involved? How involved were you in building the enterprise strategy? And have you ever had a chance to kind of step back and hand it off to your sales teams? Are you still involved? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the question, by the way. I might not be the right one to ask because we've done a lot of mistakes. We actually started out 2 years or 3 years before, before the product was ready, and we signed volume agreements with larger corporates. And I would say that actually worked out because the hype cycle of IoT was really spot on, and we were building a brand as well, which we were quite successful with in Scandinavia. So we signed up several, 5 larger contracts, 100,000 sensors, which is kind of almost impossible at that stage without the product and these type of deals. And I was heavily involved also with the team. But what we experienced was that this did not mature. And so there was a lot of problems along the way. I think maybe the biggest problem was that some of these companies, they had set themselves up so that was a specific business unit, and that was not continued on after the hype cycle with some of the telcos specifically. And we got delayed with manufacturing, and then 2 years later, the interest on and the relations that we had was not in that position yet. And then I would say some of the customers also took advantage of the delay and found other ways to deal with this. So these larger contracts that we started with, I'm not sure if that's the right way. That's kind of the starting point for this. From a strategy point of view, I very much agree with what's been said here. I think from our point of view, what we've succeeded the best with is to find customers that you can understand their strategy and their interest and really support them along that line. And then be very, very careful about finding the right contact early on with the right responsibility and the right KPIs. Start small, let them try. I would say be extremely patient along the way and guide them on. We for other reasons, we were maybe not the best on that all the way, but we've always been honest and tried to help the best we could. But our intention was to have a few customers. We got a lot of customers at the time, and then that meant it was also hard to support, and we were not kind of structured really internally to support the world. So when it comes to my involvement in this, early on everything, afterwards less and less, more and more business driven, trying to improve the processes and so on around it. But it's still something we can improve on. And I think the sales cycle for us now as well is 2 to 5 years on some of these engagements, which is a lot for a startup.
Yeah.
Did that
I'll
answer
ask the rest of the, oh yeah, thank you. I'll ask the rest of the panelists. Do you agree with starting small?
Yeah, I think, I mean,
pilots later, but I'll just ask you now.
Yeah, for us, that's really worked well. And then on the other side, maybe where you start small in the innovation department is not where you scale on the operational side. And then finding the balance there with the right contact points and the right handover and the right rep cases and so on to show and to build trust. That's extremely important along that way. So there's a lot of work. But you can also understand it because, as mentioned here earlier by Maya, I think they put themselves on risk and the company at risk on these large deployments. So what we also see some customers of ours is doing now, they do large internal installations as well first before they're rolling out as kind of a product with their brand on or as part of their offering.
Awesome. Gary, you had mentioned when we talked that you're not as inclined towards pilots? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I think ultimately it kind of comes down to the type of solution and the fit with the organization. So from our perspective, if we're thinking about pilots, pilots would work for us in situations where we get good buy-in and commitment from the organization that, they're willing to make a serious concerted efforts towards deploying DealPath and leveraging that with their existing process. Where we see pilots being a little bit shaky is if people treat it almost like a trial or a free trial. Ultimately, that could lead to lower engagement. People, less willing to try it out. So from our perspective, pilots, if we're setting up a pilot which progresses into, an ongoing agreement or having sort of paid pilot that has a natural progression towards it, I think we're more willing to do it. In our earlier days, especially as we're trying to understand enterprise feature sets, work with clients on kind of a partnership level to both, deploy, learn, build, and iterate off of kind of what we're working with them on. Pilots has been less successful for us in that sense. But similarly, I think maybe we are at a point where, we have had successful pilots now that, we have the feature set, and maybe it's just a mentality for that.
I'll ask all of you, starting with Gary, unpaid or paid? Are you willing to do an unpaid pilot? Are they always paid? What's your philosophy?
We generally go towards paid pilots.
Yeah, so about us.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think pilot gets a bad stigma at the end of the day. Going back to the trust thing, it's what is the problem you're trying to solve? Is this company looking to solve that problem? And can you bring a solution to the table? If everyone conceptually agrees that assuming we're able to solve the problem, this is the solution we want to go with, we should be able to come up with a framework to de-risk how we make that decision. Paying for a pilot to me is more of an indication if you're worried about the level of maybe, to Maya's point and to Eric's point, like, are you dealing with the decision maker? Are you dealing with a champion, right? If you have any questions or concerns about that, at least asking about paying is a good way of indicating like how strong of a desire do they have to, if they're not going to pay for a pilot, are they going to pay for the whole solution, right? Like, some of these solutions, Maya, 1,000 site rollout is not a small investment, right? So you better just de-risk those things up front for you and for the customer to understand what is a common goal, right? And why they would or wouldn't pay for it. If they're invested and they want to do it, the nominal dollars of paying for a pilot probably shouldn't be an issue. But it's a broader conversation.
I think for Maya and Eric, we talked about because there's a hard cost associated with selling your hardware. You can't really give it away for free. Is that the case? Something you agree with?
This is a very complicated. Rick, you want to go ahead?
No, go on, Maya.
I mean, it's controversial. I guess there is a fine line between, a pilot is not only a project that, if this is a strategic customer that will definitely influence the growth, right, factor for your company. It's something that we should, look at. My tendency is to go, of course, paid means that, the other side has skin in the game, and you always want that. You want a balanced relationship, right? It's not, nobody's doing you any favors. If that's the point, then this is probably not going to go, and develop into a large, right, commitment or large scale commitment, especially Eric, like Eric's company, when you deploy hardware somewhere and that it has a lot of associated costs with it. If your customer is not willing to, take on some of that risk, then again, like Steve mentioned, is there money for a larger rollout? Especially, when we're talking about $10, $15 million rollouts, a $50,000, pilot should be somewhere on the scale of like, it's a no-brainer. If this is worth, investing in building a relationship and a mutual commitment that, again, balance is very important between, the companies and making sure that you are serving the same mission. And another thing that I would add that, pilots, even if you do decide to do something that serves the strategy of the company and it's very important, there are ways to mitigate that. It's not only deferred payment would be a great way. Reaching KPIs and, getting payment after would be a great way for a smaller startup to, win a little bit, and not just say free. Free would be, something that is a little difficult to really understand why someone would do that to the other side. But
no, those
KPIs
are
important thing. Yeah, reaching KPIs and defining them and going into the pilot with a timeline agreed upon, with a very clear KPI. Did we get this or did we not, right? It's not just to get the foot in the door. That kind of designs your, partnership path. It's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move on just because we don't have a ton of time. But I just wanted to ask you, when you guys think about when you first went into enterprise, what's the one lesson learned, or what would you tell folks on the call today not to do? Kind of hindsight's 2020, but maybe tell me a quick story about a time that it went south. Gary, I know you have one for me. Maybe like a
I guess,
story.
Yeah. I would say, a big part of really selecting your first few enterprise clients is really making sure that you're supporting clients that fit into your overall roadmap and strategy of where you want to get to. So making sure that not only are you supporting a client that, is a great product and fit for you to really have a partnership and learn and grow your roadmap from, they're also peers of firms that you eventually want to work with as well. The best sort of growth we can get from landing the right enterprise clients is really, you're able to leverage that to get to your next 50 or 100 enterprise clients that fit the mode and also fit where you want to get to. So, with that, I would say that being very picky and fitting the right enterprise client for that is huge.
Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, when you asked me this question, I thought of immediately like 8 questions I would want to ask before I, went engaged with like a big enterprise customer that could dictate how successful that venture would be. I know when I was at Honest Buildings, we were working with Hudson Pacific Properties, a REIT based on the West Coast. And while we were our solution was amazing for project management, bidding, and cost management, it came to light sort of like towards the end of the period in which we were going to kick off the pilot that a big problem for them to solve was reconciling those costs back with their accounting system, and it was not necessarily our strongest suit. And I think if we had made more de-risk that or made it clear at the beginning, because we ultimately did a pilot with them and then an integration became really important, and that took a long time to do. And to Maya's point, like we kind of got away from our KPIs, and ultimately, they decided at that time to not proceed with the pilot. But if we had just done a better job, and a lot of that was on sales too, is just like, are they aligned with our core value props? Like, are we setting ourselves up for success? And they paid for that pilot too. So, and we had executive sponsorship. So even those aren't it's not like a recipe that indicates you're going to win the deal.
I was going to jump in really quickly too. Yeah, in this case too, in ours, kind of from what we're seeing, we really need to find the right enterprise customer who's understanding that they're buying something that is being built on. So not only are they comfortable with what a product is and the vision and where you're going, but they also understand kind of where your current shortcomings are and where you go to. So really having that kind of forthcoming and tender on both sides of that is huge for us to really understand if we can support them.
We're having trouble hearing you a little, Gary.
I will try to speak louder if that works. Yeah, I was just saying the big partnership comes back down to communication and making sure they understand what you're building and where you get to, and they're comfortable with that as well. So keeping the communication open on both sides.
Awesome.
Megan, building on that, just I guess if I had to say one thing that really stuck with me, and is maybe the most important thing, is setting expectations and being truthful about where you are as a company, so they decide to help you versus flipping that from vendor buyer relationship to a design partnership and having them be bought in on where you want to be together and having them help you get there versus coming to them with a set of promises that you won't be able to keep, and keeping it truthful, setting expectations and building this more as a strategy to win together versus I'm going to sell you something is very important and key. Impossible as a startup to win without it, in my opinion.
our growth team works really hard to position our portfolio companies and companies we work with as partners and not vendors, because I think you're treated very differently. And there's a lot more patience and understanding and excitement around the long-term goal that you're working towards together, rather than just being frustrated that maybe a feature set isn't available at that very moment. Because, you know, startup to startups and then things happen. So, Eric, did you have any final thoughts on that? And then I have a couple more questions on the owner side, and then we'll take.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good points there, and I've kind of a one-sentence summary, I think. I would think that finding a few dream strategic partners, not one, but a few, and be very patient and support them at an exceptional level. That's kind of what you really have to do. And then and all of these other things will I think there's a long list, but that's kind of the high level of I would think.
No, I love that. I'm going to switch gears real quick, and I think we can go a couple minutes over, but and a couple people have asked this in the chat, but one of the issues that you face when you're selling to enterprises, they want you to be proven, and you may think you're proven, but in their eyes, you're unproven, or you don't have the traction that they're looking for. You don't have case studies that you can send. So how do you guys approach that? How do you convince a large enterprise to take the risk when they may you know, fairly or unfairly view you as unproven? Steve, you want to?
And we talked about it a little bit, but it's difficult, and you have to start building some trust, and you can do that through the sales process, frankly, with every single exchange, right? So it starts with listening on conversations when they're talking about their business objectives and the actual challenges that they're facing, and being empathetic to those, and really trying to understand, hey, well, here's what I'm hearing about your problem. If we could solve it by this, would that actually be valuable? And then acknowledging, yes, like that is value. And then from there, what can you offer, right? Like think outside the box. You have investors, you have your executives, people who have credibility from their past companies, other companies they've invested in, who could probably speak on your behalf where you can't, show that track record. And then, we've talked about, pilots, and again, I think they get a bad stigma, but at the end of the day, like, if you believe in your product, and know that if you give the opportunity, you're just going to nail it, then be willing to create terms of engagement that de-risk your customer, right? If they know, if you're telling them, hey, we have put on paper all of the things that are going to deliver the result that you want, all we're asking you to do is take this very small step in this direction, and we will deliver, then, you should be able to overcome a lot of those challenges. I mean, some people just are risk averse, and that goes into the whole conversation around, Gary said, is like picking the right partner, right? If going in, they're risk averse, they don't really adopt technology, this isn't something that they typically do, maybe you just say to yourself, hey, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here. But other than that, there's probably creative ways that you can get around.
Yeah. And just to add to that as well, I'd also challenge, if they're asking that question, are they really looking to buy, right? It almost feels a little bit like a qualification of, are you talking to the right person? From their perspective, are they looking at something that is more of a vitamin that's nice to have, or is it a real pain point they're trying to solve? And it could very much be one or the other. It could be, more of a pain point for someone else on their team. So I think, one thing we learned is you never really want to have just one conversation going with any firm at any time. You want to make sure that you're really working all the angles and learning from that. In parallel to that, this is kind of where I guess we're doing a shameless endorsements, but, having great partners and support channels is huge. They all spark for us, being leveraged in network, with Megan, John Bianco, and helping understand, where we can go with the industry, knowing, how the industry and kind of the firms are set up is huge too, to understand, who we're targeting to at that point.
Appreciate the plug. Maya, did you want to add to that?
Under promise and over deliver, always if that's the possibility. And I think one more thing just that kind of ties into at least Turntide's state of mind or culture is, try to look at the positive angle of things and try to, shift the conversation. Unproven from a positive angle is also being flexible. If, taking an unproven situation means that you're still raw enough to tailor exactly to that enterprise, and that's a plus, right? So giving that enterprise an opportunity to impact your roadmap so it fits and be part of the design of your product is a huge plus. So I mean, it's at the other side of, you know, unproven, meaning, you know, not mainstream yet, and that's a good thing. And it tailors into like building trust, like we said here multiple times, creating a relationship that is that is looking at both companies' goals, and shifting the conversation to be more strategic versus, hey, show me you can do this or that. It's about listening to the customer, tailoring what you have to them, making sure you are proving what is important to them, right, throughout this experience.
How do you weigh like tailoring versus building for many and not building for one, right? Like you're not, none of you are building custom solutions, maybe a little bit on the disruptor side, but
I think Gary touched on this a little earlier, and I 100% agree. Going after an enterprise customer that isn't perfectly, you know, adding to your longer term strategy or enhancing, you know, your ability to get market share where you want to be is by definition the wrong, right, enterprise customer to start with. If you're right on your strategy, it means that you're not really only building for them, you're building for that segment of customers that you're after, which is your target market. So if you walk into a room as a startup to your first enterprise customer and you're not willing to tailor your product, it means that you're not listening to the market. Like, I mean, you have to, feedback is one of the most important things that it's invaluable for your longer term success. So I wouldn't, if you're going to the right strategic customer that will teach you about the market segment you're after, it's not really tailoring to them, it's tailoring to the segment. But it's, you know, you need to make sure you're you know, approaching the right customer that will teach you about, you know, where you want to grow.
Yeah, that makes sense. Eric, is there anything you wanted to add to that? And we'll kind of start to wrap things up.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. I also think that if you work closely with an enterprise that is not in perfect alignment, you could end up being pulled in a very wrong direction, which is not good at all for either the enterprise or yourself. Because then your product becomes something it shouldn't be. And for the enterprise, you might not be able to focus on that forward and support them along the same trajectory on the journey. So to find the right company that have the same strategy, works in the same direction as you do is very important, this dream customer.
One quick thing, just because I've made this mistake a lot of times early on, is, you know, for any SaaS companies out there, be very clear with your teams, right? Like, here's our ICP, here's the types of deals that we can do, and don't get yourself too far down the road, and know when to like cut loose, right? You know, just because you got somebody on the phone doesn't mean this is the only time you're going to sell to that organization. Maybe they're not ready to buy now, come back later. Time is your most valuable commodity early stage, and you can just waste tons of cycles chasing a giant whale that you can't ever land. And there's probably some things you can do up front to say whether or not on its surface or based on a couple discovery calls, whether or not it's something that's worth throwing those extra resources at, pulling your CEO in, pulling your investors in, all those things, right?
Yeah. Gary, we had talked about for really strategic enterprise customers, you typically bring in a number of folks onto the call, and that's been fruitful for you. I want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, something that we kind of saw earlier with our approach towards supporting enterprise firms is, you know, kind of going back to the theme that everyone's bringing up, it is a partnership. You know, when one of our earliest firms, one in Boston, they've been great partners for us in kind of giving us feedback on roadmap, helping us understand where things are going. It kind of spurred the development of our client advisory board, where we have some of our large key kind of advisory kind of strategic firms on there. So we've learned that's been a great asset to us, both from a product feedback perspective, and also commercial real estate it's a small but very well connected industry. So as sure you all are knowing, you know, if you're talking to someone about your product, you know, within a minute they're probably texting or calling someone up with their buddy or another firm on how they're using it. So being aware of that and making that an advantage for yourself is huge. So, you know, making sure they're understanding and aware of where you're going, making sure their buddies are all great, making sure their peers are using So from our perspective, as we're getting towards the tail end of kind of working with firms, we do want to make sure that from our side, we're really showing, how we, to some extent, laying some cards on the table, showing how we work with firms, how we partner with them on the roadmap, making sure they're aware and are able to speak with our customers and client references, but making this kind of like a open, communicative, transparent way to make sure they don't have any risk going into it. They see that, their peers are getting value out of it. They know how we work. It's not really a surprise going into it. And to that point, even if you don't have features and functionality that they might want immediately, they understand where you're going and why selecting you now will get them there in the future as well.
So if you were to start today or to build a company, who's the first either on the owner or occupier side person you'd go to that you feel like is the most innovative and forward thinking and willing to take meetings with early stage companies? You can kind of plug some partners you work with, or if you're not comfortable answering, feel free to
well, I already talked about the other part, so we'll start with that. But from our kind of list of clients that we've had great success with, all the folks on our client advisory board we love to work with and engage with again. Most recently, we had Oxford Properties go live, and they've been fantastic to work with. Their team really understands how to implement new technology. So from our side, it's been very smooth, almost not a lot of work, which surprised us, effort to get them on board. Blackstone has been fantastic as well. We're deploying and rolling it out with them globally across all their firms and their portfolio companies. And their innovation team has been just awesome to work with as well. But
so
yeah,
Oxford and Blackstone are two good ones.
Two good ones.
Never heard of Blackstone.
Nice to say JLL.
And JLL is smart.
JLL.
Right. Exactly. That's
You
great.
don't have to, but if
Exciting.
you want to.
Or
Forgot that one, Gary. I do love the idea of the client advisory board, like bringing them in and making them feel like you're building it together. And
it's
hopefully,
about the community, right? And
yeah.
I think it makes it very natural for them to speak with other firms on how they're using it. And that does help not only just with validation, but also engagement. They might talk to another firm who's using it in a certain way that they haven't thought about before. And it's just much better having, them hearing it from someone else who's using it successfully than me talking to them for hours at end about,
Right.
I also think
All right,
there's been a huge shift in there's also been a huge shift in real estate owners kind of, creating innovations, creating venture funds, right? And so there's like a disposition towards innovation that may not have been there, 5-10 years ago. And, if you're a young company, like look at that, a company that has an innovation person or has a venture capital side, they're going to take them. They might be willing to take a meeting because there's a dual interest there, right? And they might be able to help you in the way that JLL, the growth team has been great, like shepherd you along the process or help you figure out, well, here's on the property side, the operation side, you need to be talking to this person. On the investment management side, it's this person. On asset management side, it's this person. So, and those are just hugely, hugely helpful resources to have. So
who's your company that you first go to?
It's funny, when I was interviewing with Jones, they asked me the same question. The first company I thought of was Rudin Management, and they all smiled because they were piloting with them at the time, and now Rudin's a customer. But Rudin is also a great example of, like, you think of Rudin as like an institution in New York, family business, Class A office properties. You probably, the archetypical company you would think is not necessarily innovative, but they couldn't be farther from it, right? They were early adopters of VTS, early adopters of honest buildings, so like definitely, and that's another thing, right? Like, talk to your peers in the space. I know companies that were adopting a Hightower in 2014 when Proptech wasn't a thing, right? Those companies were clearly willing to take a little bit of risk if it meant upside. And that's another good indication. Like, are these companies using other prevalent softwares that you see or hear about in the market?
So Rudin. We'll go to Rudin next. Maya, what about you?
You're gonna put me on the spot here.
We can go to Eric next if you want a minute.
No, I will only say that the thing that guides, and everyone here is right, and look for things that that make your decision easier and value proposition match. Look for companies that are publicly committed to the similar mission statements that your company has. People with the same titles, people that have, for us, it's publicly commit to sustainability, to, carbon footprint reduction. These companies like, definitely Blackstone that you've mentioned and others have made, public commitments around this. So, upfront that you share the same vision, that they have full intention of moving this forward. BMW Ventures was huge for us on the BMW side, for example, around sustainability. For us, they've been more than awesome to work with. They have, endless facilities as well in that regard. So there are multiple ways, but that's the guiding value for us. Alignment with the mission statement, very important.
Love it. Eric?
Yeah, I think it depends very much on the product that you're selling. If you sell a product that can be developed and iterated on fast, that's very different if you have a kind of say a medical product with 10-year cycle on. Maybe if you talk about the first company I would talk to, it would not actually be to sell to them or anything near it even. It would be to have some companies where it was mentioned here, some advisors that can discuss with and kind of get feedback and doodle on what is good and bad with the idea, and try to bring them along for a way and maybe offers as well. Also, we have had some that we've given incentives along the way so that they kind of have the same idea and ownership as we have, and what is best for the company, and look out for new ideas and also follow the products and give feedback along the way.
Yep, love it. All right, the last question I'll ask you is, are you hiring? Who's hiring? Michael Beckerman made a comment about wanting to encourage real estate folks to get into tech, and I'm sure we have some folks on the call who would love to make the leap to startups. So we're all hiring.
Yeah, thanks a lot for mentioning that, Megan. We released our product in the US now, so we're building sales there. So
Constructive is building their US go-to-market.
We're hiring every possible department, so please reach out.
Okay, Steve.
We'll probably be looking at that a little later in the year.
It is a tough time to be here. Tough to put on the spot. What about you, Gary?
Yeah, we're scaling business across the board, so please feel free to reach out.
But I would say, companies like myself and Gary, we talk a lot, and I'm always happy to help, especially in this time. I know companies that are hiring, and we're a community in Proptech, right? And like Gary said, we're a network just like the owners and operators are. So don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. We probably are 2 degrees removed from an opportunity.
Well, that's a great point to end on. I would encourage folks on the call, if you're interested in connecting with any of the panelists, to head over to their virtual booths. JLL Technologies also has a virtual booth if you have any questions or you want to talk to anyone from our team. But again, I just want to thank everyone so much for joining. This was very lively. I'm sorry we went a little bit over, but 30 minutes just isn't enough, Next time it'll be 2 hours. But yeah, thanks again, and we'll see you all soon.
Take care.
Thanks everyone.